The house that waited for him. Opening sequence. The night is quiet when Daniel Hayes returns to Maple Hollow for the first time in years. The road curves through the familiar town, but nothing feels familiar, not the trees, not the houses, not even the air. He drives as if guided by muscle memory and regret instead of direction. His mother's funeral ended an hour ago. His heart hasn't ended anything. As his car rolls to a stop in front of the old house, Daniel expects darkness, a home abandoned, a life that ended, a chapter closed. But then he sees it. The porch light, that small, stubborn golden glow. Still on, still warm, still waiting. A lump forms in his throat. His mother used to say, "Light tells people they're welcome, even when they think they're not." Daniel stands at the foot of the steps, staring at the house that shaped him, hurt him, loved him, and somehow, even after her passing, still greets him like a mother who refuses to shut the door. The moment he unlocks the front door, the house exhales. And somewhere deep inside, something in him exhales too. The scent hits first, lavender, old wood, a faint trace of the detergent she always used. It's as if she walked out only minutes ago. His chest tightens. This isn't just a house. It's a memory frozen in place, waiting for him to finally stop running. He takes a step forward. The floorboard creaks the same creak he grew up hearing every night when she checked if he was asleep. The silence is heavy, but not empty. It's the kind of silence that used to be filled by her footsteps, her humming, her life. Daniel doesn't turn on any lights. He just stands there, bathed in the faint glow from the porch, letting the memories press in. Tonight is not about understanding. Tonight is about facing what he has avoided for decades. And as the house wraps around him like a quiet embrace, one truth becomes painfully clear. Coming home isn't the end of the story. It's where the real story finally begins. Part 1. The Return. Daniel returns to his mother's house after the funeral and sees the old porch light still glowing. I didn't drive straight home after the funeral. I circled the town first past the old diner, the shuttered hardware store, the empty baseball field where teenagers still carve their initials into the bleachers. Maple Hollow was smaller than I remembered, but maybe that's what happens when you've been gone too long. Everything shrinks, except the regret you bring with you. By the time I turned onto Birchwood Lane, dusk had already settled across the neighborhood, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple. The houses looked older, some sagging a bit at the sides, but hers, my mother's house, looked exactly the same, as if time had politely stepped around it. Then I saw it, the porch light, still glowing, still warm, still impossibly steady. I had forgotten how that light looked at twilight golden, soft, like a quiet hand reaching out. She used to turn it on every night, no matter what, even when I lived 3 states away, even when we weren't speaking, even when holidays passed in silence. She always said, "A house should never let a person feel unwelcome." Back then, I dismissed it as sentimentality. Now it felt like a message I was decades too late to receive. I parked and stepped out, my legs stiff from the drive, my chest tight from everything I still hadn't processed. The air smelled like early autumn, cool, sharp, a hint of wood smoke from a neighbor's fireplace. I stood at the bottom of the steps and stared up at the light. It should have hurt to look at, but it didn't. It felt like an embrace I didn't deserve. I reached out and touched the railing, same chipped white paint, same rough texture under my palm. Suddenly, I felt 12 again, running up these steps after school, shouting that I was home, expecting her voice to answer back. But the house stayed silent. Only the light greeted me. I climbed the stairs slowly, almost afraid that getting closer would break whatever fragile illusion was holding the moment together. But the bulb didn't flicker. It kept shining, steady and patient. For the first time since the funeral ended, I felt something shift inside me, something heavy, something I'd avoided naming. Loss doesn't hit all at once. It comes in waves. And this was a wave. "I'm home, Mom," I whispered. The words felt awkward leaving my mouth, as if I was speaking to a stranger. But saying them, made my throat tighten. The porch creaked beneath my weight. The night grew darker around me. Her house, waited. I stepped inside. The air was still, untouched. Light from the porch spilled into the hallway behind me, casting a warm glow that made the shadows feel less intimidating. I didn't turn on the interior lights at first. It felt wrong, like I might disturb something sacred. The suitcase slid from my hand, landing with a soft thud beside the door. I didn't feel ready to cross deeper into the house just yet. I needed one more moment with the light, with the doorway, with the transition between outside and inside, between before and after. Grief is strange like that. It turns you into someone who needs to pause in the places you would normally walk right through. I turned back toward the porch, letting the warm glow wrap around me one more time. That single bulb had outlived more family conversations than I had the courage to admit. It had witnessed every version of me: the good son, the angry teenager, the distant adult, and somehow, unbelievably, it was still shining. Maybe it shouldn't have meant so much. Maybe it was just a light. But that night, after everything, after the funeral, the strained condolences, the weight of unspoken apologies, it felt like the only thing welcoming me home. Just before closing the door, I caught myself hesitating, as if the outside world, with all its noise and expectations, was easier than stepping fully into the quiet she left behind. But I finally whispered, to no one and everyone, "I'm here." Then I closed the door gently behind me. Part 2. The house that still remembered her. The house still holds her scent, her things, and the kind of silence only she used to fill. The first thing that hit me when I finally stepped into the hallway wasn't the quiet. It was her. Her scent, subtle, familiar, unmistakable lavender laundry soap mixed with cedarwood. I froze for a moment, hand still on the doorknob, because for one impossible second, I felt like she might walk out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel and scolding me for letting the cold draft in. Grief has a way of lying to you when you least expect it. I took a slow breath, letting the air settle into me. It was strange how a house could still smell like someone who wasn't in it anymore, like the walls were unwilling to accept she was gone. I walked deeper inside. Her shoes were still lined neatly by the door black flats, faded at the toes. Above them hung her old jacket, the one she wore every morning when she checked the mailbox, even though the weather rarely changed in Maple Hollow. The fabric still held its shape, like her shoulders were still there. I reached out and touched the sleeve. It was cold. The living room was exactly how she kept it. The blanket she crocheted years ago draped over the sofa. Her knitting basket, half full yarn, still threaded through a needle as if she'd only put it down to answer a phone call. A book sat on the coffee table, spine cracked, page saved by a worn receipt. I picked it up, chapter 14. I wondered if she ever made it to chapter 15. The silence inside the house wasn't like the silence outside. Outside, silence was normal, calm, even comforting. But in here, it felt heavy, full, almost alive. It was the kind of silence that used to exist only when she was asleep, or when she was thinking so deeply she forgot to answer me. The kind of silence that knew her footsteps, her humming, the way she cleared her throat before speaking. Now it was waiting for something that would never happen again. I moved into the kitchen. Her reading glasses rested beside a half-finished crossword puzzle. Her handwriting filled most of the boxes, neat, precise, confident. 2 squares were left blank. "What word were you trying to remember?" I whispered to no one. Her favorite mug, the one with the faded red cardinal, sat in the drying rack, a little chipped on the rim. I used to tease her about throwing it away. She never did. She said it felt just right in her hands. I opened the pantry out of habit. Cans stacked exactly the way she organized them, vegetables on the left, soups in the middle, baking supplies on the bottom shelf. There was a jar of sugar, half full, with a piece of tape labeling it in her handwriting. Sugar, refill when low. I felt something sharp twist inside me. She lived her whole life, making sure things didn't run out. Food, warmth, love, forgiveness. Even when I did, I leaned against the counter, letting the weight of the house settle over me. Every object held a memory. Every memory felt like a lesson I understood too late. I walked back to the hallway, glancing into her bedroom but stopping myself from entering. Not yet. The doorway felt like sacred ground, too intimate, too fresh, too final. Instead, I stood there and listened. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. The silence wasn't empty. It was holding her place. It was preserving the spaces she used to fill her breath in the mornings, her footsteps across the hardwood floor, her voice drifting through the walls as she talked to neighbors on the phone. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the exact sound of her laugh. It was softer than I remembered. Or maybe my memory had worn down at the edges, like the spine of her favorite book. I opened my eyes again and looked around, trying to understand why the house felt like it was waiting. Maybe it was because she lived alone for so long, always hoping someone would come by, visit, stay. Maybe the house had grown used to expecting someone to walk in again. Or maybe it wasn't the house. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was the one who had been waiting. Waiting for a moment like this. A moment to face the life I left behind, the mother I never understood, the weight of years I never tried to repair. Standing there in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by her scent, her things, her absence, I finally felt the truth settle into my bones. She had lived her entire life in this house, filling every corner with her presence. Now I had to learn how to live in the version of the house she left behind. A house full of echoes, a house full of reminders, a house full of everything she never said out loud, and everything I never said back. The silence pressed around me again, but this time, I didn't fight it. I let it wrap around me, familiar and foreign all at once. Because this was the first night in a long time that I truly understood. She was gone, but the house still remembered her, every inch of it, and whether I was ready or not, it remembered me too. Part 3, The Photo Album. Daniel begins cleaning the living room and finds an old photo album. I don't know how long I stood in the hallway before I convinced myself to move again. The house felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to a life I never took time to understand. And maybe that's why I finally walked toward the living room. Some part of me needed to feel useful, needed to do something, anything, other than just feel. Cleaning seemed like the safest place to start. The living room was dim, lit only by what little sunset slipped through the sheer curtains. Dust floated lazily in the air, catching the last streaks of gold light. I pulled the curtains open to let more light in. The fabric felt brittle in my hands, as if it might crumble if I tugged too hard. Her favorite armchair sat facing the small TV. A knitted cushion rested against its back, one she made years ago. I gently picked it up and placed it aside, then began clearing the small table beside the chair. Old mail, a few grocery receipts, a pair of reading glasses, a pen that no longer worked. Everything felt intentional, like she had touched these objects only days ago. But she hadn't. I swallowed hard and kept working. I moved to the coffee table, lifting her crossword book and sliding it into a small box for things to keep. The rug beneath my feet had faded in the center from years of sun exposure. She used to complain about that sunspot, always saying she'd replace the rug one of these days. She never did. I took a deep breath and knelt beside the old wooden cabinet under the television. The handle felt loose when I pulled it. Inside were board games missing pieces, VHS tapes from decades ago, and stacks of magazines she refused to throw away. I began pulling items out one by one, sorting them into piles: trash, donate, keep. Then, behind a stack of dusty magazines, I found it. A photo album, thick, heavy, covered in dark blue fabric that had once been vibrant. The material was worn at the corners, threads fraying like the hem of a well-loved sweater. I froze, my hand resting on the cover. I hadn't seen this album in years, maybe decades. I sat back on the floor, crossed my legs, and pulled the album onto my lap. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just traced my thumb along the edge, remembering the last time I saw it, Mom sitting cross-legged on the floor on a rainy afternoon, calling me over to look at old pictures. She loved reliving memories. I loved avoiding them. Finally, I opened the cover. The first page hit me like a punch to the chest. There I was, infant me, wrapped in a yellow blanket, my mother holding me in her hospital bed, smiling the biggest smile I think I ever saw on her. Her hair was messier than usual, her eyes tired, but the joy, it radiated right off the page. I didn't remember her ever smiling like that later in life. Or maybe I had simply stopped looking. I turned the page. Toddler me, covered head to toe in mud, sitting proudly in the backyard while she laughed behind the camera. Me in kindergarten, missing one front tooth, hugging a dog we only kept for 6 months before it ran away. Me in 4th grade, standing awkwardly at a school recital, violin crooked, eyes annoyed. I remembered the moment clearly, how embarrassed I felt, how frustrated she was that I hadn't practiced enough. Each page moved through time like a slow, careful journey. Birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, school pictures where I pretended to smile, summer trips to the lake. My childhood was right there, captured through the lens of a woman who never stopped trying. But somewhere in the middle of the album, the tone shifted. The photos changed. They grew fewer, more spaced out, less joyful. Teenage me appeared taller, angrier, arms crossed in almost every picture. A forced smile here, a glare there. She kept taking photos even when I didn't want her to. I could imagine her voice then. Just one picture, Daniel, one, for me. I used to sigh loudly, roll my eyes, and stand stiffly until she was satisfied. By senior year, there were gaps between the photos, months missing, maybe years. The pages felt colder, emptier. I saw a picture of me at graduation, standing beside her. I remembered that day too well, the argument we had that morning. Something about the future, my plans, my stubbornness. But in the photo, she was smiling anyway. And I wasn't. My throat tightened. In the later pages, the pictures were mostly of her alone. Her garden, her knitting projects, the house, a bird feeder, a sunset. Little things she loved, little pieces of her quiet life. There was only one photo of us in the last third of the album taken during a short visit years ago. I looked at myself in the picture. Stiff posture, forced politeness, distance written across my face. I looked at her. Soft smile, hands folded, eyes trying their best to show joy. I closed the album, not fully, just enough that I didn't have to look at the last picture anymore. I let it rest on my lap, hands trembling slightly. How do you measure the distance between two people who once lived in the same world? How do you account for the years lost to silence, stubbornness, and pride? How do you forgive yourself when the person you owe the apology to is no longer here to hear it? For a long moment, I just sat there on the floor, staring at the closed album. The house around me felt heavier, fuller, like the memories were leaning in. Finally, I whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry, Mom." The album didn't answer, but the silence felt different, less accusing, more understanding. I placed the album gently beside the keep box. It belonged with me now. Whether I was ready for it or not. Part 4. What we said and what we never said. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, the photo album open across his knees. He wasn't turning the pages anymore. He didn't need to. The memories were spilling out of him faster than any photograph could hold them. The house had a way of doing that, pulling old ghosts out by their collars. He leaned back, the leather of the aging sofa sighing under his weight, and closed his eyes. He tried to remember the good things first, the soft things, the safe things. He saw a small version of himself, maybe 7, maybe 8, running barefoot across the wooden floor. His mother, Evelyn Hayes, was in the kitchen, humming like she always did when she cooked. Something sweet, maybe peach cobbler, floated through the memory. "Slow down, Danny," she had laughed. "One of these days, you're going to slip and break your neck." But she said it with a smile, with warmth. It wasn't the kind of warning that scolded. It was the kind that protected. He could almost hear her humming now, as if the walls still remembered her pitch. But then the memory shifted like every memory eventually did, and suddenly he wasn't 7 anymore. He was 40, standing in this very living room, arms crossed, jaw clenched, his mother sitting in the recliner, looking up at him with both disappointment and exhaustion. "You're not listening to me, Daniel," she had said. "You never listen. And you never trust me," he had fired back. "You treat me like I'm still a kid." She had pressed her lips together, that familiar hurt flashing across her face. "Maybe if you stopped running from everything—" "I'm not running." "Yes, you are. You always are." And then the line he wished more than anything he could take back, "Well, maybe I run because staying here feels like drowning." Silence had followed, a heavy, terrible silence. He hadn't apologized. She hadn't asked him to, but neither of them healed from it. Years passed like that. Little arguments, big ones, words sharp enough to leave scars. Two stubborn people who loved each other more than they ever managed to say. Daniel rubbed his eyes, trying to force the memories to slow down, but they kept coming. Another argument, another slammed door. Another night he drove away instead of staying to talk. He had always believed there would be time to fix it later. But now, standing in her house with her absence pressing in from every corner, Daniel understood the tragic truth. There is no later after someone is gone. The photo album slipped from his hands and closed itself, as if the house had decided he'd remembered enough for one night. Daniel rested his elbows on his knees, head bowed. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered, even though there was no one there to hear it. But maybe that wasn't entirely true, because the porch light outside still glowed, patient, warm, the same way she used to wait for him when he stayed out too late as a teenager, the same way she left it on every Christmas Eve, even when he didn't come home, the same way she kept it burning all the years they barely spoke. He wondered if she'd kept it lit, hoping he'd return not just to the house, but to her. And he wondered whether she believed he still could. Daniel inhaled a trembling breath, forcing himself back to the present moment. The room felt smaller now, heavier, as if all the unsaid things were sitting in the corners, watching him, waiting. He stood up, closing the album gently. He placed it back on the shelf. And for the first time since he arrived, he whispered, "I miss you." The silence didn't answer, but somehow that hurt less than he expected. "If you're ready, I'll continue with Part 5, The Call That Didn't Heal Anything." Daniel stared at the phone in his hand for a long time before dialing. He wasn't sure why he wanted to call Alex at that exact moment. Maybe it was the weight of the photo album. Maybe it was the echo of old arguments still ringing in his mother's house. Or maybe grief had a way of reminding you of the people you'd already begun to lose. His thumb hovered over his son's name, Alex Hayes, 25 years old, living across the country in Portland. Busy, working, independent, distant. The call connected. One ring, two, three. Then a voice polished, calm, and unfamiliar in its maturity. "Hey, Dad." Daniel closed his eyes. Even the greeting felt like a closed door. "Hey, Alex." He tried to keep his voice steady. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." A short pause followed. The kind of pause where someone considers just saying goodbye and hanging up. "I'm fine," Alex replied, "just busy." "Right. Yeah. I know how it is." Another pause. Daniel forced a smile even though no one could see it. "I'm back in Maple Hollow, at your grandma's house." Alex exhaled quietly, almost tired. "Yeah, I figured. I saw the obituary." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because Alex sounded cold, he didn't. He just sounded disconnected. Like grief was something happening far away, to people he didn't really know anymore. "Your grandmother always liked you," Daniel said gently. He wasn't sure why he said it. Maybe he was trying to build a bridge out of thin air. "Yeah," Alex answered. "She was good to me." Silence again. Daniel pushed forward. "How's work?" "It's work." "How's the new apartment?" "It's fine." "How are you?" A long pause this time. "I'm doing what I need to do, Dad." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. The conversation was slipping away, like sand between fingers he couldn't close. "I wish you were here," he said before he could stop himself. He didn't mean physically, though that would have helped. He meant emotionally. Present. Connected. But Alex didn't hear it that way. "I'm sorry," Alex replied lightly. "I've got deadlines, and flights aren't cheap." Daniel swallowed. "I know. I didn't mean it like that." Another breath on the other end. Measured. Controlled. "Look, I'm sorry about Grandma," Alex said softly. "I really am. I hope you're doing okay." Daniel nodded, even though the boy couldn't see him. "I'm managing." "I should get going," Alex added. "It's getting late." "Yeah," Daniel whispered. "It is." The silence stretched. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, Alex." The line clicked. Daniel lowered the phone to his lap and stared at it, feeling the familiar ache settle in the quiet, heavy kind that didn't announce itself, the kind that had been growing between them for years. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was distance. Deep, cold, carefully maintained distance. And Daniel couldn't tell anymore whether Alex built that distance or whether he himself had taught the boy how to build it. He set the phone on the coffee table and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, letting the weight of the moment sink into the room. He had lost his mother, but the knife-twist truth was harder to swallow. He was losing his son too, just in a slower, quieter way. And maybe, just maybe, that kind of loss was worse. When you're ready, I can continue. Part 6. The light he left on. The house grew colder after the phone call. Not physically, the heating still worked fine, but the silence changed. It felt heavier now, like the walls had heard everything and decided to hold on to it. Daniel stood from the couch, joints stiff, and switched off the living room lamp. The room fell into a soft dimness, lit only by the faint blue of the moon coming through the window. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as he walked toward the front door. Instinctively, he paused. The porch light, that old, stubborn light that had greeted him earlier, still burning after all these years. He turned the brass knob and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool, brushing against his face with the kind of honesty he hadn't felt in days. It carried the scent of pine and cold earth, Maple Hollow's quiet signature. The light above him flickered just slightly, humming in that tired way old bulbs do. He looked up at it, studying the glowing glass. His mother used to leave it on every night when he was a teenager, waiting for him to come home after late shifts or poor decisions. Even when they fought, even when he stormed out, even when he swore he wouldn't return. She always left it on. A silent promise. You can always come home. Now she was gone. But the light was still here, glowing as if she had just stepped out for groceries and would be back any minute. Daniel reached up and touched the siding near the switch box, swallowing the knot in his throat. "I'm still here, Mom," he whispered. His voice cracked on the last word. He didn't know who he was saying it for, her, himself, or the pieces of both. After a moment, he flipped the switch. The porch light momentarily dimmed, then brightened, steady, warm, unfaltering. A simple act, but it felt like opening a door inside himself he had kept closed for too long. He lingered there on the porch, leaning against the rail, looking out at the quiet street. No cars, no sounds, just the soft hum of the bulb and the distant chirp of late autumn crickets. He realized something then, something he had been avoiding for years. He wasn't just alone in the house. He was alone in his life. No partner, no close friends, a son drifting further away each year, and a mother who had been the last person to leave a light on for him. The loneliness wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, a constant companion he'd mistaken for routine. Tonight, that truth sat with him, heavier than his grief, heavier than the silence in the rooms behind him. He finally stepped inside, shutting the door softly behind him. The porch light spilled a gold glow across the front window, like a small promise trying its best to hold back the dark. Daniel whispered to himself as he walked toward the bedroom. Tomorrow, I'll try again. Not at forgiveness, not at fixing everything, not at being a good father or a good son. Just trying. For the first time in a long time. He turned off the hallway light, left the porch light burning outside, and lay down on the creaking bed. Alone. But something, just a small something, felt different. Like maybe that old porch light wasn't just waiting for him. Maybe it was asking him to stop running,